Hey guys, this is Cole Liker.
Hi, I'm Neil Collins.
You are listening to the Unused Substitute.
The Unused Substitute.
And you're listening to the Unused Substitutes.
Get off the bench!
Hey there, Little Red Riding Hood, I got a problem and it's complicated. Going through change and I just can't ignore the signs. Hear them now, it's so loud it hurts. Hear me growl, hear me howl when the full moon
Long throw, ball's gonna bounce down, it's free in the box. Bicycle kick! Goal! Rowdies! What a play! What a shot! And it's 1-0 Rowdies!
Hear me growl, you see me run, you see me jump. Try to fight, but I emerge with the prize in hand. You better watch out, it's gonna take more than what you got. Our lives are on the end, the silence is deafening. You're so helpless against this full moon. Don't ever say I didn't warn you, because I came to play, came to play, I came to play, came to play, I came to play, came to play, I came to
Georgie
play.
wrists off. Well, now around the bagel! He takes the bagel off!
Good evening, everybody. You are listening to the Unused Substitutes, quote unquote, live on Radio St. Pete, part of the Beautiful Game Network, and sponsored by Roughneck Scarves and Golden Goal Press. My name is Matt, and on the other end of the microphone, wire, internet, fiber optics, whatever, is Steven. Steven, how are you doing?
I am doing great for a Wednesday, calling it a Tuesday, doing the inception of time. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we're saying quote unquote live because you're listening to this now on Radio St. Pete. It's Wednesday. If you're listening to it on podcast, it might be a day or two later. But for us, it's actually Thursday or Tuesday night.
You almost slipped there, and we
I am
went
sliding all
forward in
kinds of
time
directions
and backwards at the same time there.
sliding all over the place in terms of time. Yeah, it's Tuesday night, June 30th. Because I'm going to be out of town tomorrow.
June, you are all over
Man.
the place. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
We're I'm going to mark that part to cut out later. July 30th. I am going to be out of town tomorrow and Thursday. So we decided to go ahead and record this tonight. Radio St. Pete is going to play this for us tomorrow. And other than this whole debacle of explaining it, it's going to seem just like a regular show. In theory.
In theory, yes. In theory. So the important thing to note is if anything breaking news happens on Wednesday, just follow us on Twitter to get our immediate reactions, because we're not going to be able to talk about it yet.
Yeah, we don't have the discipline report for the week. As far as we know, everything is still. I don't know anybody from Charleston coming up this weekend. Well, actually, no. Charleston does not have anybody in any discipline. They have one guy near one card away from last week's, but their game was postponed this last weekend, so no one picked up a yellow card or a red card. And in our situation, still the same. We'll talk some more about that in a little bit too. But before we get to that, it was bound to happen at some point. And honestly, it's Red Bull 2 away. You can't even really say you're surprised, even though we've been a much different team this season. The Rowdies traveled to, Montclair State University and fell 2-0 to Arby's 2, to the roast beef sandwiches.
Yes, the baby bowls, or whatever you call them. Like, I've heard 17 different names for them, I think. So one of them is bound to stick. Something has to be them, right? All
right, so usually we do the good, the bad, and the ugly from a 2-0 loss. Only the second loss of the season. Rowdy's still sitting in first place by 2 points, that thanks to their comfortable little advantage they had built up going into that game. Probably not a ton of good. What's your bad? What's your ugly?
Well, okay. So obviously, losing sucks. But there are actually a lot of positives. One thing that we noticed, or that I noticed at least, and I had a chance to watch it with with a small group over at Jimmy's with Ralph's Mob, and one thing that that was really just unfortunate. And I don't want to harp again, you guys know me. I don't like harping on players that have bad games cuz especially when you're having such a good year like this. You don't want that getting around to the players. You don't want that to dispel their own spirit a little bit. Outside of the two defensive like random miscues, we probably like almost win that game, quite frankly. Like it's kind of unfortunate the way that played out. And that it actually involved the same player, but I I honestly, it was just a random kind of fluke of a result. Jorgensen was pouncing on random errors because he's following the play as a good striker should. That's how he scored a lot of goals this year, and they did what they did. The fact is that this was a near complete reverse script from the first game of the year that we played against them, where in our game, in the first game of the year, we scored twice and then we got a red card and then hung on to get a 2-0 victory. On the flip side, this past weekend, New York scores twice and then they get the red card and then are, holding on for dear life at the end. So, I mean, there's a lot of parallel to the fact that like the stats were kind of flip-flopped in some categories. I think one thing that really ruined that game though was that referee was awful on both sides of the ball. I mean, literally, 34 fouls called, and I'm sorry, but at least half of them should not have had a whistle blown.
Now, just to warn you, we usually have no problem criticizing referees. However, just make sure you're calm about it. You don't want to get pet keyed.
I do not want to get pet keyed because that would be really depressing, and you would have a very lonely show for several weeks in a row.
I'd suspend you for 2 weeks without pay.
Yeah.
Which really wouldn't affect anything. But also, I don't suspect you would do what Petke did. Like I'm not trying to argue that was inappropriate. The response, I think his actions definitely were. Just clear that up.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Oh.
But I mean, yeah, no, the referee this past weekend, I think a lot of the yellow cards that he was issuing were not very good. I don't know. He did not have a good match in my opinion. And I think that interrupted the flow of the game because in a lot of ways, I think it actually affected New York in a lot of ways more than it affected us because one thing that New York has always been, like, when they came here to Al Lang, New York was this ridiculous high press club. That's how they've always played. Really, really high press, a lot of energy, closing down on everything. And again, one of the funny things about the first game is that we counted, we went back and we were counting the number of passing sequences that we had before we went a man advantage. And even after, we were not connecting a lot of passes in the game at Al Lang to begin the year, as far as making some strings of passing together. And like literally right off the kickoff, we had like 6 passes in a row or something like that, which is a better passing sequence than literally the entire game that we played. We did it off the kickoff, this past weekend. So it was funny how much of a difference this game was. And I think that we were doing well, but I think the foul count actually affected them a lot of ways, a lot more than it affected us because they played back. I mean, if it wasn't for 2 like random counterattack style goals, they bunkered like pretty much the whole match. And even then, we still almost got a couple of goals in on him. I mean, Steinberger had, I thought, a bad miss. When Gonzatti got like that ball slipped through and he was kind of one-on-one the keeper saved it, but then Steinberger gets the ball like 25 yards out and then just shanks it, which brings me to.
And didn't Lucky have one called back for offside too?
Man,
Trying to remember that because it was all the way back on Friday. It's now Tuesday. At my age, that's a long time ago. I think so. I think well, maybe, but either way, it brings something up that has me worried still a little bit about this team, and that is that we don't score goals from outside the box at all. No. Literally,
we've only scored 2 all year. And I think even one of those was on the line. And this game kind of showed again that we just don't do that. And I don't know why, I don't know for what reason, but we just don't take chances from outside the box, like really at all. No. And I think that's something that kind of worries me, especially now. we're getting into an interesting phase of the season, right? We're now, we're nearing the 2/3 mark if we're not there already. And I think this weekend might cross that line or whatever. But, now we're starting to kind of get into this transition where we're starting to go, okay, where's the playoff teams? Where's the playoff line? What does your opposition look like? But what do you look like going into playoffs? And what's your form? What are your weaknesses? Because I hate to tell you, Rowdies fans and supporters, but there's still weaknesses on this team.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's one of the things that we have to look at. And for me, a glaring weakness on the offensive side of the ball is that we don't take shots from outside. And if we're going to end up playing good, and this is something I said weeks ago, right? If you play against good teams that are doing a bunker, this team has a real problem scoring goals against them. And guess what happened? We lose 2-0. Even though we had a couple of chances that we should have finished, like, Siage's, Wondolowski at the very end.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Leo had that chance in like the 6th minute that that Lauro
Went
gets a hand
right.
on. And now also something else to factor into this, and honestly why he's still, playing at this level. He might need to take someone from a higher level and take a look at him. Lauro from Red Bulls too. He was the OCB keeper that shut us out in that game where where they came back and drew right at the end on the penalty. He's just a solid keeper and seems to have pretty good games against us. Former
Lauro's,
Detroit City player, like that's going to factor into it. But yeah, we had that little flurry early on. Leo had a good shot in the 6th minute. Possibility shout for a penalty in the 7th off a high boot from one of the players. Lucky put one in the net in the 8th minute, called back for offside. So early on, I know New York looked pretty good in the maybe first 5 minutes of the game, and then we kind of turned it around for the next 5-6 minutes, and then they score in the 17th, and I think it's it changes the complexion there.
It was. I mean, and look, I mean, it was a pretty fairly balanced game. I mean, obviously we had a reserve keeper out there, so that's going to skew the result a little bit. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe that second goal, maybe McCarthy can save it, but otherwise, I mean, it kind of is what it is in terms of that context. I thought, I'll say this, Kasana, or I should say M. Kasana, was invisible most of that match. His touch count I thought was really low. And I think that with Tejada being back this upcoming week, I think that might be a change that you might see. Is Tejada coming back in and M. Kasana coming back on the bench? I thought, and it was funny. Here I am. One of the things I mentioned when the rosters were announced and who was on the bench and everything was that Malik Johnson was starting as a right outside mid, and that Barry was not on the bench. And I'm like, whoa, like Sean Barry, I thought, like, if he's healthy, that's a game he should be starting. Because I thought that was a play that I thought, or a player that I thought we needed in that game. And I mean, Johnson didn't have the greatest of games. He lost a lot of dribbles, which is a little unusual for him. He's usually been a better dribbler than say the gentleman from the last couple of years that everybody loved, whose name suddenly randomly escaped me. But I mean, I didn't think he had a great game. There were a couple of times where he kind of just randomly lost the ball or lost control of the ball during a dribble while he was trying to beat a defender, and it was just kind of one of those things where it was like we were sacrificing a lot because we didn't have much of a right outside, because him and M. Kasana were generally playing on the right side together, and we weren't generating a lot of offense on that half of the field, especially when you factor in the fact that Murad didn't have the greatest game. And now you're talking all three of your right outside players are off on the night. And I think that completely threw us out of whack as far as that's concerned. But something that is worth noting is that it's easy to go out and say, oh, well, you could just chalk this up to having a random bad night and, it's okay. You can have some of those during the thing. Well, we're getting closer to playoffs. And I hate to break this to you, but if you're going to win a championship in a playoff where you have to win 5 games to win a championship, it means you got to win 5 games in a row. And you can't come up with some excuse of randomly going, oh, well, we just, quote, didn't score or whatever. No, you're going to have to find ways to pull off a miracle every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, for instance, if Siage doesn't miss that shot on the goal line, if that goes in, now you have a chance for pulling a draw at the death against a team that you have a man advantage on. In the playoffs, you have to be able to do that. Because I hate to tell you, just because you're down 2-0 in the 84th minute in a playoff game, that miss in a playoff game,
That's devastating.
that's absolutely just gonna have bleachers get torn out. So it's easy to say this right now because we've only lost 2 games on the season. You know, we had chances and it is what it is, but you can't make up that excuse at the very end of the year. You're going to have to find a way to show some grit every now and then against the better teams in this league. And here we are now again. We've got 2 losses, and okay, that's great, but those 2 losses are against 2 teams in the top 4. Guess what? If you're going to go and you're going to win a championship this year, if you're going to go to the finals this year, the odds are really stinking good that you're probably going to have to go through New York or North Carolina later this year. So
Right.
yeah, it's great to go back and say, we lost against them in the regular season, no big deal. Well, you can't really just go off and say that. And if, say at the end of the year, if New York ends up squeaking by us, say by a point, and they have the home field advantage for the year, now I'm a little worried. If we have to go to Montclair for the Eastern Conference semifinal because they finished number 1 and we finished number 2 in the seeds, because again, right? Doesn't this go back to what we were talking about like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, where it was like your expectations of the season, because we have been kind of surprising ourselves in a lot of ways, our expectations are shifting, right? At the 3 months ago, it was just make it into the playoffs. And now it was like, well, maybe we can try and fight for a home playoff game. And now we're all sitting here talking about, well, man, the difference between 1 and 2 is going to be razor thin at the end of the year. And that's going to come with the territory of having a surprising year out of the blue where your expectations change, and they should change. But again, 2 losses against teams in the top, 4. And those are probably teams you're going to be facing again. Not to mention, guess who the other team in the top 4 is that we'd never beat either? Indy. So, I mean, that's something that is interesting to me to note, is that we've got a loss against New York, a loss against North Carolina, and a scoreless draw with a man advantage at Indy. That's 3 of the worst games we've played this year, and that's literally the 2, 3, and 4 teams in the standings right now. That's kind of frightening. In some ways, I'm glad we can crush teams like Bethlehem, but in a lot of ways, that's not going to matter come October and November.
Well, you see, I think what we're doing, we're being sneaky about this. Like, we're going to pile up the points on the lower teams, and then we're going to throw some weird stuff out there when we get these top 4, so that when we get to the playoffs, we switch it up and they don't know what's going to hit them. That's obviously what's going on.
Oh yeah.
So while you were mentioning that stuff, I had an idea or a thought about you mentioned the referee, and then I went back and got a little info, and my thought isn't proven out, but I did get some evidence in the other way. So what my thought was going to be, I'll go ahead and explain it. You ever read Howler magazine?
I know plenty of its existence, but I've never actually subscribed to it or anything.
They had an interesting article a couple issues ago. It might have been in 2 years ago. About
I like how you went from a couple of issues to 2 years.
Well, I remember it involved an Atlanta United game, and I think it was from their first season. So I think it was around that time. It was kind of like a behind the scenes, what game day is like for the referees, and they're following Mark Geiger and his crew, which is already interesting. I learned that he pukes before games all the time. That's just his thing. But because it was like a late season game, and Atlanta United's pushing for the playoffs, and I forget who they were playing against, and it was one of those he specifically mentions to his crew that this is a game that has playoff ramifications. We've got to be extra on top of things. And I kind of wondered if the referee looked at this and goes, well, it's number 1 and number 2. We're like 2/3 of the way through the season, and he's kind of getting it in his head that there's going to be incidents and he's got to crack down on it. But looking at his record, and he's done Rowdies games all the way back into NASL. Him handing out 6 and 7 cards a game is not uncommon. Let's see. His very first game was back in 2010. It was an Open Cup game, 5 yellow cards. Let's see, 6, a red and 5 yellow cards. Like everything, like 2 is the minimum, and that happens very rarely. There's frequently 5, 6 that, like, this is a card happy guy. Which may explain why he's consistent. He's been a lower division referee since 2010, and I don't see too much of him. He's been a 4th official in a couple MLS games, but I don't think he's ever been any higher than that.
I'll give you a hint. As somebody that has witnessed the assessor program firsthand, at least at the lower levels of refereeing, that's exactly why he's not getting MLS games right now. Because that's a problem. I mean, it is a problem. And as a referee, you don't, and in defense, like, it's not like referees go out there and say, I have to do this, right? It's just that's the difference between a good ref and a bad ref of interpreting the match. There are referees that, like, nobody goes out there looking to throw 8 yellow cards or 10 yellow cards in a game and get somebody double yellowed and look at the ejection and go, oh, this was a great playoff match. Look at everything I had to do to try and keep control. Referees don't want to do that. But the difference between a good ref and a bad ref is being able to interpret the flow of the game in order to make the right decision when it needs to be made. Not about the frequency of those decisions. It's just, in general, did you identify the times where it warranted taking the next level from a foul to a yellow?
Right.
And that's the thing.
Applying the rules in the correct situations.
Yeah, and there's going to be physical games that are extremely difficult to guess that. Again, New York and Tampa Bay, we obviously have a bit of an on-field rub, which is great. I love the fact that we have an on-field rub with somebody in this league. But and it is a playoff match. It's number 1 versus number 2. We get it. Nobody really likes each other, but I think he was misinterpreting some of what was happening on the field, and I thought he got a little whistle happy, and that turned into a little card happy. Because, like I said, I thought, but going both ways, there were fouls and yellows that absolutely had no reason to be called. And I think if a better ref is reffing that match, I don't think Red Bulls go down to 10 men, for example. I think that we end up I think it ends up maybe being a 2-1 game. Let's give the defensive gaffes. It might be a 2-1 game with fewer fouls, but I don't know. Like, it's just I don't know. I think overall, though, I'm okay with the performance as a whole, but there are indicators that make me worried that I want to see corrected by the end of the year. So,
yeah, I mean, I know on the show last week we both said, I think you said 1-1 draw, I said 2-2. I'm not surprised by the loss, and even when I was saying 2-2, I was going to kind of throw in there, don't be surprised if this is one where we go out and drop the game, because it's that way. And like you said, the players, regardless of who it is in the New York uniform for this year, don't seem to like each other. We've got photographic evidence of the coaches not liking each other. So,
which, by the way, speaking of coaching and not liking each other, did they shake hands after the end of the game?
I didn't see. I meant to go pull that up and rewatch the ending right before we came on. I didn't get a chance to do that. Did they even bother keeping up the pretense?
It was not caught on camera if they did. There is, I've seen Wolniak on the video. He's shaking hands with the assistants, but Neil, by the time they cut over to that shot, Neil is not even in the picture. So I have no idea if they ever acknowledged each other post-game or not, which, I'm going to be honest, selfishly, I hope they didn't, because I would love that kind of a little feud in USL, because, God, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I like that. It sucks that it's like a 2-team, but we talked about this last week. I mean, they're as close to not being a 2-team as any of the 2 teams are, as far as,
come on,
the competitiveness, the level that they play at.
Yep.
we had it our first season in USL with Bethlehem Steel. Like everyone just flat out hated each other. But it's like,
So
come on, it's
true.
Bethlehem Steel. Like, why are we getting upset about this? Yeah, and that's it's kind of it's one of those things where I don't want to say that I expected to lose, but it didn't really surprise me. So I don't come out of this game feeling that upset by the loss. I think the thing that bothers me is that we had just about 30 minutes, a third of the game, with a man advantage, and created a lot of chances and still couldn't put the ball in the net.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. We've only had 2 games this year where we've had a man advantage, right? But we have not looked like
And
particularly
in
dangerous.
was it
in
only two? Because there was the Indy game
That's it. That's it.
and this one,
That's it.
and both games we did not score a goal in.
We did not score a goal, and
And
not
the Indy
only
one we
that,
had much longer.
and yes, so in the Indy game, the red card was issued in the 20th minute. Okay, so when we look at this, in both games, neither time did we really look all that dangerous with a man advantage. And not only that, but we also both missed like complete sitters at the end of the game.
Right. Like
See,
the pressure's
this
on,
past
like, oh man,
weekend,
we've got a man advantage. We got to get at least one
this
goal,
weekend,
and then we
Siage,
can't.
Siage had that ball come up off the turf at the last second there, and he ends up hitting it over from 3 yards away, which again, that's one of those shots where it's like literally harder to miss than it is to actually get it in the net, and he managed to find a way to do it. And then in the game against Indy, of course, it was Gonzati's open header on that cross, where
Right.
there's literally not a defender within 3 yards of him on any direction, has a clean header on net from like the penalty spot and just completely whiffed it. And it couldn't even get it on frame. And it's like it's hilarious that now it's happened twice with a man advantage, both against like good teams. And it's just like I don't want to say trend, but because you don't get a lot of opportunities with men advantage. Like we've only had 2. I mean, that's a lot of games played with not a lot of opportunities to kind of practice that, I guess you could say. And that's just it. I think the thing that frustrates me about it is that we haven't looked dangerous with a man advantage on the field. Like our game plan this weekend, we honestly didn't look dangerous even though we had a man up. It was a
Yeah.
lot of possession in the
Yeah.
back, but not a lot of threatening plays going forward. So I don't know. I'm ready to put this to bed. I'm ready to kind of move on, but there are things that I'm watching about this team that make me worried. And I don't know. Our record against the number 2, 3, and 4 teams in this conference is not the most stellar, and that has me putting my thinking cap on a bit.
Well, maybe the playoffs will play out for those teams like some of the regular season has been, where the lower ranked teams are getting results, and by the time we get to it, it'll be we'll be taking on Charlotte, since it won't be St. Louis in the playoffs, despite the current table.
Oh yeah.
All right, so we'll just put this one to bed and move on. Our other notable results from the weekend, games we're keeping an eye on: Nashville with a 2-0 win over Indy, after Indy gave themselves a big dose of bad karma on Twitter early on. Did you see that?
I did not, but I also know from what I understand, Martin Rennie was not on the sideline for most of that match. Juan
Was
Guerra,
tossed out like around halftime, I think.
yes, and
Yeah.
Juan Guerra was actually the stand-in
The head
coach for
coach, yeah,
the
that's
rest
right,
of
'cause
that
he's the
match.
assistant.
So a little shout out to our former Rowdy boy that we know still loves us and appreciates everything about Tampa Bay. So
Yeah, Indy tweeted out from their, like, from the team's account, is Nashville ready for this game? And then, Nashville has that weird, bizarre looking logo that they're using for next year in MLS, and they had expanded the stop sign out from just the end, so it said nope. And then they proceeded to do absolutely nothing and lost 2-0 to Nashville, who had a lot of fun with it. I guess Nashville's entitled to have some fun sometimes. they can print it out and remind themselves about it. The other game, keeping an eye on, St. Louis 3-0 win over Bethlehem Steel. That coupled with Charlotte's loss to Birmingham in Birmingham put St. Louis back into the 10th place overall, level on points with Charlotte, but one more win ahead. So the games we're going to keep an eye on going into and throughout this weekend. Red Bull 2 plays St. Louis, a 2 versus 10. Charlotte and Louisville, which, Charlotte's technically not in the top 10, but they're level on points with the 10th place team. So I'm going to go ahead and call that pretty significant. Also, Louisville has been dropping games to lower division teams. Like, I think they lost 3-0 to Loudoun last weekend. So anything's possible in that kind of matchup. North Carolina and Indy, both teams are the bottom of the top 4. They're 3rd and 4th. They're level on points. Indy has one more win, so they win that tiebreaker. And then Charleston in 9th place versus us in 1st. One to keep an eye on. Your overall, your traditional table looks like this. The Rowdies are still in 1st by 2 points over the Red Bulls. Indy is still sitting in 3rd, 6 points back, 2 games in hand. So we appreciate that loss to Nashville. They didn't pick up any ground with that game. North Carolina FC also with 37 points, but has played 2 more games, has 1 fewer win than Indy. Nashville in 5th, Pittsburgh in 6th, Ottawa in 7th, Louisville in 8th, Charleston 4 points back of them in 9th, and St. Louis in 10th. St. Louis currently sporting a record of 6-6-6, obviously because they need help from Satan in order to sneak back into playoff eligibility. Makes sense.
You got some of the dark arts in St. Louis. I love it.
It's they got to do something.
Got to do something in the heartland.
It's we're back to having the same top 10 teams in the traditional and the points per game table, although the positions are flipped for a couple near the bottom of the top 10. But really the one thing that I'm keeping an eye on, and I just like how this works out. If you have a positive goal differential, you're in the top 10. If you don't, then you're not. You can look at records and wins and points and games in hand and all that, but that is the biggest thing that jumps out to me. Even if you've got a 1 goal positive differential, you're in the top 10, like Louisville and St. Louis. Charleston, who we're going to face this weekend, has 2. Red Bulls leading that category with 23. We were tied with them going into last weekend, and now we're 4 back thanks to them picking up 2 and us dropping 2. Birmingham starting to make a little bit of noise, but it might be a little bit too late. They've got 3 wins in a row, probably too late to make a real playoff push. Although I think they signed a new defender today, Akeem Ward. I don't really know anything about him other than I saw that tweet come across while I was getting ready for the show. So they're making a push. I don't know if they're really have a chance to get back into it. Possibly. I mean, they're only 2 points back of Charlotte, and they've got 2 games in hand on them. So maybe, but I doubt it. It seems like we're entering speed bump season right now. More than half of the top 10 has lost at least twice in their top 5. More than half of the bottom 8 has won at least twice in their last 5. And then there's Atlanta.
Yeah.
Who just really hasn't won anything at all. Your points per game table. Rowdy still on top, 2.05. Red Bull 2 and Indy tied at 1.95. North Carolina FC and Nashville basically tied. North Carolina 1.76, Nashville 1.75. Pittsburgh and Ottawa 1.68 and 1.6. Charleston and Louisville City in the 1.4s with 1.44 and 1.43 respectively. St. Louis at 1.33. So it's really starting to look like that 1.33 per game is where you need to be if you're going to try and get into the playoffs. Kind of the big difference here is Charlotte, who's level on points with St. Louis in the traditional table, is just barely over 1 point a game in the points per game, and they're actually sitting 3 spots back of the playoffs in the point per game table. Anything else you see jumping out at you?
Clearly there are different groups forming, and we said this before. I mean, obviously the top 3, has pretty much stayed the same for about a month now as far as games are concerned. I mean, it's Rowdies, Red Bulls, and Indy 11 right now.
Right.
That is pretty much your top 3. And at this point, it's going to be an interesting fight to see who finishes 4th. But I mean, I, we've been saying this for a few weeks here. I don't see anybody from the bottom half getting in. Like, I mean, good on Charlotte to make that run, but you see what happens as soon as they lose a game because of all the games that they have that they're playing right now. Considering everybody above them has played so few, you lose one game and all that momentum just disappears in a moment. So I still think their shot is I think anybody below the playoff line right now is a real long shot.
Who it wasn't last season, I think it was year before, the first year we were in USL. Who was it that had that huge collapse at the end and fell from like 6th or 7th all the way out to the playoffs? It was either Charleston or Charlotte. I think
Yeah,
it was Charlotte.
that's a question to ask before the show starts taping,
Well,
because
yeah.
then we could actually research it, because
So there's
I
that.
don't have any recollection of that whatsoever.
I want to say it was Charlotte. Like they were cruising along pretty locked in the playoffs, and then just the bottom fell out and they lost everything.
You know what?
I think
No, you're
you've got to
right.
see that
You're
kind
right.
of
It was
collapse.
Charlotte. It was Charlotte. You're right. It was Charlotte. They dropped like 9 games in a row to end the year. It was just the most unbelievable collapse.
Yeah, and I think Charleston may have snuck in right over them into the playoffs at that point. You're gonna have to see that kind of collapse, I think, for some of these below the line teams to have a chance at this point.
I agree. I agree.
And if that happens, then your Birmingham's might have a chance, and Loudon still has a ton of games in hand on everybody, and a lot of them are going to be played at home, I think, because they were traveling around like Hartford was the beginning of the year while the stadium situation was being sorted out.
Because they were just playing at Audi Field yesterday, Sunday. So yeah, it's still not. They haven't even really opened that new complex.
I don't think Hartford's open theirs. I don't think Loudon's open theirs yet.
No,
at
they
all.
definitely haven't. Yeah, they definitely have.
All right, so let's move into our next section. We talked about this a little bit last week, and it's something that we've talked about kind of on and off air and at the stadium and at the tailgates and online and Reddit and Twitter and everywhere else for years. You see a lot of teams, especially it seems like in the West. I mean, I guess the proximity to the Liga MX teams factors into it. You see a lot of teams doing kind of international friendlies, like during the season too, not just preseason or postseason, but doing some of these, during some of the bye weeks, and they schedule some of these games, and whether it's a revenue thing to bring more fans to the stadium, see, you might get some higher attendances for some of these teams you bring in, or whether it's a chance to develop your players, expose them to some of these other types of these other level of teams that they could face off against eventually. Other than the Bolton game, and then we've had the Florida Cup with the 1 or 2 years we participated in that, instead of just being a host stadium, which is kind of what it's turned into the last couple of years, and it looks like it'll be that same way next year. Doing that, is that something that you think the team should be involved in doing?
Well, I mean, this comes into an interesting point, because now we figured we'd bring it up because now it's the end of the summer, so it's all the major European teams are now going back home basically. Swansea, the team that I'm so proud of, starts this weekend in the championship. But it's an interesting question, because again, as Rowdies fans, we've been tossing around this question for years, right? About, is there value to doing a mid-season friendly? I mean, granted, we've been doing the preseason stuff against international competition for a couple of years now, but is there a difference between doing a preseason game against, a foreign team, or doing a mid-season summer friendly in that same context? Are they viewed differently, for example? I would say yes. I would say absolutely that a midsummer friendly is viewed radically different compared to a preseason friendly that for your own self is a preseason game. I think mentally for the fan base itself, I think a fan base would look at it differently. One thing that is interesting, and this is what kind of sparked some of the questions in the discussion on this, was at just how bad the attendance has been getting with the the International Champions Cup series, the major brand name that does all the most of the summer friendlies, and it really raised a question about, is the American soccer fan base, is the American soccer marketplace, has it changed in the last even just 5 or 6 years? Because again, we were seeing teams like Juventus and things like that would have 50,000, 60,000 people show up, and now we're drawing crowds in the, they're drawing crowds in the 20,000s. And there's a lot of questions going around about whether the ICC as an entity itself is even really viable anymore. I think this is an interesting discussion. At this point, there's actually a very interesting discussion to have with, even with Rowdies fans ourselves. Would it even draw enough interest to make it worth it in general? Like, it doesn't even matter who you almost put in there. Obviously, we're not going to play Manchester United, but if you're going to go play a team from the championship or, something like that as far as Europe is concerned, would anybody show up? We already went through Bolton, and that attendance wasn't great. Granted, it was midweek, but that attendance wasn't spectacular. I think it was 3,800 or something like that. That number wasn't great. Why would we think that it would be any better now?
Yeah, a lot of it, and I've seen people. I saw Taylor Twellman tweeted about the ICC attendance, that this is a good thing. It's a sign that the American soccer market's kind of getting more sophisticated. They know these games are ultimately meaningless. They're not traveling with their traditional first team rosters in a lot of cases. I also think a lot of it, though, is who the teams are. Because what you're starting to see, the Premier League got really big in the US in what the last, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. As far as people getting up, going to bars at 6 a.m. to watch games and stuff like that. That's gotten big. And there's other teams out there, Barcelona, Real Madrid. If you bring in Juventus, and it's funny, I just saw that because I guess Juventus played a friendly in Singapore, and Ronaldo didn't play. So the people who bought tickets in Singapore are suing Juventus now because he didn't play.
I saw that too.
And I went to Charlotte to see Liverpool and Milan, and with the understanding that, hey, this is not going to be like the start of the Premier League roster. And I've gone to Fenton, Boston. I've been to Baltimore to watch them as well too, and that was kind of more about the experience of being there, going with some friends to watch a game. But it's it was two Premier League teams playing each other. But you start to see League One in France is now trying to expand there and increase their presence in America, and the Bundesliga has been trying that for a few years. Italy will probably be the next one. England's popular, and then you've got a couple of the Spanish teams are popular. I don't know that there's a market for the French teams or the Italian teams outside of like a Juventus, or maybe PSG draws a crowd if Neymar's still there and if he plays. But the market, Twelman says, more sophisticated. Maybe it's more fickle. Like, you can't just drop a European team into the stadium and say, hey, come watch this. Like, yeah, we played Bolton, and it was Bolton's first preseason game, and also it was Bolton.
Yeah, and they got relegated that year.
Yeah, they had almost got relegated the year before. They did get relegated that season, so I like to think that it started off with a loss of the Rowdies, just put them in a tailspin.
Absolutely.
You've got to have the right team. Like, it was cool. Like, Wolfsburg came here, and if, like, I think that's when Chicharito was with him. If he had traveled with him, and I don't think he did for that game, then maybe there's a big crowd for that, because you market that individual player who was kind of a hot name at the time. But other than that, I don't know that there's a giant market for Wolfsburg. Once Marcel Schaefer signed here, there was kind of a bigger market, and thought maybe we might see some other action that way. But we've seen when Nacional played Warsaw, you had a lot, the crowds, and that's the thing. Like,
oh, that was such a fun game too. Oh my gosh, I loved going to that game.
For us to talk about whether or not the team should be doing this, like, there's a couple different reasons why you do a game like this. One, you're going to make some money off of it. You're going to bring a crowd in. I mean, whoever the Rowdies play, people like you and me are showing up no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason why the Rowdies would do something like this is to bring in people that don't normally show up at the stadium. There were tons of fans, National fans, I remember there, who like live in Tampa, and they're like, yeah, we don't come to games. Like, well, maybe you should. You could add to this, bring what they're doing that night. They're like, the Warsaw fans were incredible. Like, it's not just people traveling from overseas to follow their team. It's people in town with connection to those teams too. So you kind of have to know your market. Like, bringing in somebody from the championship, I don't know that moves the dial here. But Tampa has a large Colombian population. Bringing a popular Colombian team or a big Colombian team, that's probably a big deal.
Oh, you bring in somebody like a Cali, America de Cali, or the Deportivo Cali. Oh my God, you kidding me?
Yeah.
That place would be overflowing.
Like
with
the
people
Western
there.
Conference teams do this a lot with Liga MX teams, because there's a lot of kind of cross pollination of fandom in Mexico and in the Southwest U.S. I mean, Tijuana is a good example, being so close to the border, right by San Diego. Like, there's a ton of fans that kind of go back and forth to that. I don't know if you bring a Liga MX team here, just any random one, that you get that big of a crowd. I think there's certain teams that you would.
Oh yeah, like if you were to have like Veracruz come over here and play the Rowdies, like nobody's gonna show up because Veracruz has like no fan base. But like there are certain teams out there, even in like Mexico and like a Toluca or something like that. That's like kind of like right now they're kind of a mid-major team. They haven't like made a massive run, for several seasons here. But they're such a respected brand. They've had decades of dominance before that. I think those are teams that you could be able to pull a lot of folks up, and that raises a kind of interesting point too. Of if the European teams aren't drawing the fan bases, or at least we think we've tapped that market out, do you go to Do you go to Central America? Do you go to South America, and do you start pulling that crowd now?
I mean, honestly, that's probably what I would do, because the window of opportunity for bringing like an English team over here, it's mostly going to be a preseason or possibly end of the season kind of deal. You're not getting like the star players. And I know we have this partnership with Norwich City, and I've watched a couple of Norwich games now as a result of this. They played some really attractive looking stuff. They won the championship and have been promoted. If Norwich comes over here, do you sell out Al Lang? I don't know that you do.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I know there's probably some fans from Norwich who would come over, and there are some Florida-based Norwich fans.
And I
would like to think
case.
it. I mean, but I don't know that you do.
Yeah,
especially because it's going to be a preseason game for them, and you might get some, maybe some more of their regular players because they're, trying to work themselves into shape for the Premier League.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, you've got to find the right teams in the right situations, I think.
I think so too, but I think it's still worthy of having the discussion. I mean, look, MLS is having this discussion right now. Granted, there is.
I mean, yeah, like I'm not going to be here
reasons.
Wednesday night because I'm going. Now it's because someone gave me a free ticket to the game. I wouldn't have bought it on my own, but I'm going to go cheer for my favorite team that plays in Orlando City Stadium, the visiting team, who in this case is Atletico Madrid, but also like Rooney and Schweinsteiger and Ibrahimovic, like some names to be able to say, okay, I saw them play in person. Like that's, there's a little bit of it of that too, but like, I'm not going there because I, really love Madrid or I really want to see the MLS All-Stars lose. Like, I got a free ticket to the game and I'm turning it into a vacation weekend with my family. Like, that doesn't like move the dial for me other than those factors.
Yeah, I think I think it's definitely something that a lot of like say Rowdies fans would have to kind of do some real soul searching for is, it at what point do you say, yes, we should do this? At what point should we say no? I mean, obviously it hasn't been that big of a discussion point because it really like people haven't necessarily been talking about it or clamoring for it really publicly. it's something that we've always kind of talked about quietly over the years. Like, I wonder why we don't do this.
Yeah,
And
because you
now,
see all the other teams doing it, promoting it, and you're like, oh, you just feel like
and
that's something you should be doing because
and
another
now
team
that
is doing it.
Yeah, and now that we see things like, say, for instance, granted, like I said, there's monetary reasons involved for this too, but we see things like Leagues Cup or whatever they're calling it. This little fictional tournament between Liga
Yeah.
MX and MLS. And granted, like I said, there's monetary reasons for that. They're trying to control more revenue between the two leagues and keeping it out of CONCACAF's hands. So they're trying to avoid CCL by playing more matches against each other. Okay, that's conspiracy theorist level stuff, but it's probably true. But you see more connections with trying to getting more access to south of the border as far as getting these Central American, South American teams. I honestly don't see a reason why we shouldn't try and join that kind of bandwagon right now. I would, if I'm taking a direction, I think that would be something that is still new enough to, like, say, an American audience, especially soccer audience, that I think that we could still get in on that bandwagon if we wanted to. And I think that would be something that I think we should consider is maybe playing a South American or a Central American team for their preseason here in America, because obviously their season basically just started a couple weeks ago, by and large for most of those countries. I think that might be something that we should look into, and I think that would be good for not only for promoting our brand within our marketplace in general, but I think it also exposes our fans to other cultures and other sporting fandoms, and I think that would only help grow the culture here for our own supporter group. Because
I,
as much as I want to say we have all this deep history and we've been doing this for 10 years and stuff, the fact is that we've only been doing this for 10 years.
right.
And I think there's still decades worth of growth that we can't put our feather on a cap and say, okay, we've created our culture. Okay, we're done. No, it's going to be evolving for our entire lives. As
Yeah,
long
it's
as this
a
team is
it's a
around, this culture
constant
is going to different.
it's a constant building job, and that's the pros for this are obvious. Like, you have an opportunity to reach out and give people a reason who don't normally come on a match day, a reason to come, and then maybe, hey, they enjoy it, they want to come back. Let's say, oh, this team's going to bring in teams like this every year. Maybe I'll get some tickets and keep going. There's definitely a positive side to it, and I also think a lot of it is, it's easy to look at like a European club and say, well, that's a big club or that's not a big club. In America, it feels like everyone's fighting to create this impression that they're a big club. So when you see one team doing this and your team isn't, then all of a sudden, oh, now we're not a big club because that other team's doing this something and we're not doing it. Like, it feels like it's a kind of a fear of missing out thing. So there's positives, but also, let me throw that, and this is kind of where we always, when we talked about this in the past, kind of what we got into. So right now we're top of the league, a 2-point cushion between us and second place. Like, for example, I think in like 2 weeks we have an off Saturday, like after the Birmingham game at home, then we don't play again till like the 17th maybe or something like that. So say you schedule a game during that time period, you put some of your regular starters out there, and let's say Guinzotti breaks a leg and he's out for the rest of the season. Is it still worth it?
Well, I mean, the counter argument to that is that could happen in a regular season game and it doesn't really matter.
True, but do you need to add extra opportunities for something like that to happen, especially when you're in a good spot like we are right now?
I don't know. I've seen professional athletes light fireworks and lose fingers. So freak accidents happen. Like, I don't I don't know. Like, I don't see. I personally don't consider friendly games a reason to be scared of player injury, considering stuff can happen literally anywhere, anytime. I don't know if
Madrid's
playing it,
lost like 2 or 3 players to injury from the ICC, if I remember correctly, that they're going to be out for significant periods of time.
yeah, it could also be improper warm-ups and not stretching
Yeah,
correctly and not being adequately prepared for the quote friendly that you're about to play in. So I I don't really see. I mean, let's put it this way. We just went through a stretch, right? Where the beginning of the year, like March, April, we were basically playing 2 games a week for like 2 months straight.
Right.
It really didn't affect us really all that abnormally. I don't really see why throwing one extra game in a month of July where we only played like 4 games all month, I don't really see that necessarily hurting, especially if we can convince like the schedule makers to kind of help us out with that. I really don't see a reason why that should affect it. If your team is being prepared properly, it shouldn't really be a factor. I mean, we certainly didn't look slow or anything during our craziness to start the year. We looked fantastic and we came out like basically the number 1 team in the league. What's an extra game in July? You know, in
Right.
that
Right.
context. So I don't know. I would say this. I'll say this. I would love to play another midseason friendly. I think that it would be something that we haven't just had a chance to do. It's something that a lot of teams do get a chance to do. And I think it would be fun playing somebody on a foreign level in the middle of a year, because right now it's hard even for a sales aspect. It's hard to sell games against, Birmingham Legion in August when it's just been league opponents week after week after week after week. You're in that summer doldrum thing. It'd be interesting to have some sort of a highlight moment in the middle of the year of, hey, here is a peak, here's something that you really want to go to, because it's hard to sell tickets to St. Louis FC and Birmingham Legion. Like, I'm sorry, but it is. That's a really hard job to sell tickets to those games to the casual person.
Right.
But if you're playing, God forbid, like a Tigres or something, where you've got these big, gigantic Mexican teams that could come in here and sell the place out, that's something that you can't get otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's a revenue and awareness thing, and number two, I think my ongoing nitpick, complaint, whatever about the team off the field is that I think that there's still a lot more they can do to reach out and try and build relationships with the Bay Area Latin community. And I don't know that this is the silver bullet. I don't think there is a silver bullet, but it seems like this is something that hasn't been done or hasn't been done successfully. Maybe they've made attempts and they haven't been able to do it for whatever reason. But I think that, it's something to try and see what happens. You make some money off of it. Sure. Possibly. You build relationships with some of these teams, that's a good thing as well too. It kind of seems like American soccer in general is trending towards scouting, signing, developing, and selling young players from Central and South America. So not a terrible way to get your foot in that door, possibly. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I would like to see it. I don't know what the chances are, but yeah, I'd be in favor of it. I think all things considered.
Yeah, I could you imagine playing like a Club America or a Tigres, say at a friendly inside Tropicana Field or something like that, and having the whole place sell out, because it probably would, because it'd be full of Mexican fans and it'd be great.
I don't know. We're not that great.
That place would
this
be
season
bonkers.
aside, we're not that great on turf. I don't know about that.
Yeah. I'm just saying that place would go bonkers if we could actually.
What
if
we played them, but in a game of kickball?
Hey, speaking of, by the way, thank you for that segue here. I love that video, and I love the fact that the team, the Rays, allowed us to kind of have fun with that a little bit. I bet that video was probably taken a week ago, but when we were training for the New York trip. But
right,
I would say this, guys, there's a season ticket event that would be really cool. Play kickball with the Rowdies. Hello, there's a cool something that we could do that, or a Ralph's Mob benefit or something like that, or supporter group in general, that
right.
that's kind of a if you're that would be cool. That'd be a lot of fun, actually.
That would be a lot of fun.
And yeah, there might only be 30 or 40 people there, sure, but at the same time, those are people who would really appreciate the close in moments with the club, with the players that you right now we're not getting. You really don't get those moments very often.
Yeah, true. True.
Maybe at a post-game dinner, you might get a couple guys to show up and you can shake hands and shoot the breeze a little bit. But at the same time, they're usually there with girlfriends or whatever. They're there to eat something legitimately and, relax after a game. It's kind of an awkward moment for them because they're still decompressing from what they just did on the field a lot of times. So,
Right.
like, it would be cool to kind of get into a completely relaxed environment where everybody's just kind of goofing off. Away from the confines of an actual, like, game itself or something. I don't know, I would think that would actually be a really cool event.
That could be
Shoot,
something fun to do.
make it a thing with, like, Rays players too and, Rays fans and just do this big, giant, massive thing where people play kickball in the outfield of Tropicana Field.
Even turn into like a charity thing or something, even if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, sure.
Rays
I
versus Rowdies, like some kind of skills challenge where you've got like kickball is the distant cousin of soccer, and then do something vaguely baseball related for the Rowdies players to do or something.
Right. Like, could you imagine putting I mean, I know we're kind of rambling on a bit of an off-topic subject here, but like, I would love to do get temporary bleachers or something to put out in the outfield for just like the one day or whatever, and do like a 5-inning kickball game, Rays versus Rowdies, where like Rowdies fans are on one side and on one set of bleachers, and Rays fans are on the other side, and we're kind of cheering against each other, or whatever, and we do it for charity. Dude, it'd be great. That'd be
I like
awesome.
that.
That'd be totally cool.
All right. Well, before we get to the kickball game, there's a game on Saturday, which I believe you are on the bus to Charleston, correct?
Yes, I will be going to the last official Rowdies regular season game at the historic Charleston Battery Stadium.
I really wish I could go. If I didn't, if
I
it wasn't
really
work
wish
coming up the day after, man, there's still a little voice in the back of my head who's like, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, just go to the game, and as soon as you hit the bus, like, take a sleeping pill, and you'll just be knocked out the whole way home, and you'll be fine.
Can bring my my melatonin gummies and just which those don't even knock me out either. So what's the point? I don't know. I don't know. Probably not, but I'm still thinking about it.
If you're listening to this, you should be going to the Charleston game to watch the last ever Rowdies regular season game at the historical Charleston.
Probably seats still available on the bus. We'll tweet out the info again later. Next few days, maybe try and get some people out there for it. So Charleston overall is 6-4-8 on the season. They're 4-0-6 at home. They're 1-1-3 in their last 5, and they've had 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 draws since drawing 1-1 with the Rowdies on the 15th. Their game last weekend against Swope Park in Swope Park was postponed. Did you see the pictures and stuff from this?
I did not actually.
So their bus, I guess the bus to the stadium was rear-ended. And from the pictures, it didn't look like there was like a lot of, it looked like more damage to the car than the bus, which you would kind of expect. But apparently several players were being evaluated and observed at the hospital. So the teams got together and the league got together, and they decided to go ahead and postpone the game for now because of, I guess, maybe the number of guys that were being held for observation. Hopefully I haven't read anything else about this. But some of the jokes were going around, like, it was the van came in definitely high. It should be a card.
Yes.
And I said it's very clearly a denial of a good parking opportunity. So that's got to be a straight red for the van. Get them off. There's no concern about player safety anymore around here. Their leading scorer, who I don't remember if he was out. Last time we played, I think, was during the Gold Cup, and I don't think that Zako Lewis played. I don't remember, but he has 6 goals for them on the season as the leading scorer. He's also tied with Kotaro Higashi with 3 assists as their leading assister. If that's a phrase.
I was gonna say, you just invented something there.
Hey, that's what I do. Checks in again, leading number of shots with 29, has created the most chances with 23. Lewis is a guy you've got to keep an eye on, and preferably a body, because this guy is kind of their jack of all trades offensively. Kuzminski, who the Skyway Casuals can tell you a funny story about him. Their goalkeeper has kept 3 clean sheets on the season. They are allowing 1.3 goals per game, so there are goals to be had. Then again, we said that about New York, and we didn't have goals. They're averaging about 43% possession on the year. You mentioned the importance of scoring from outside the box. They've got 5 goals from outside the box on the season, 2 from a direct free kick, and I already mentioned the accident stuff. What's your thoughts on this game, Stephen? What are you looking for besides a win as you travel to Charleston this weekend?
Well, let's see here. First of all, even though it's natural grass, we have been really terrible historically at Charleston, so that's something that we would have to break some trends to kind of get a result there. Because I mean, we've looked just downright horrendous at that stadium. I will say this: it's actually kind of worrying. I don't know how to feel about this because obviously, the traffic accident thing was obviously kind of a scary moment for them, I'm sure. But obviously, you take those players out to the hospital for abundance of caution, just in case. And obviously, everybody walked away fine. Everybody was discharged, I think, by the end of the day or something like that. But I don't know how to feel about this because at one point you want to say, well, they've had a lot of rest because they skipped a week, but at the same time they had kind of a weird event that kind of throws your schedule off. They still traveled a little bit. So I don't really know how to feel about what Charleston's going to be like going into this game. That's, I think, what has me really confused a little bit is how do you predict a game where a team had a traffic accident the week before? Like that's just so out of the blue and so out of the ordinary that it's not like you're getting assaulted by fans of the other team on while you're riding the team bus through the city on the way to the stadium where you can kind of get hyped against playing against those nasty, evil away fans or whatever. Like, that's one thing. Like, if you're in Buenos Aires, that's one thing. But if you're going to Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City and you get rear-ended in a busing accident in the middle of the heartland that 10 people are going to be in the stadium to watch that game, I don't know how that messes with your mentality a little bit, So I don't know. It becomes a really weird game to try and predict.
I mean, they're you can say they're rested, but they've had a significant disruption in the routine. So how does that affect, their preparations, their mindset? I don't know. And it's, they're if you look at the points per game table, they're bottom 3 of the top 10, and they've still have to seem like they got to fight for that spot. They're 9th place they're only 2 points safe in the playoff zone. Wins by St. Louis and Charlotte could put both of them in the playoff spots and Charleston out if they lose. So it's they still have some intrinsic motivation to keep fighting for wins and not settle for draws and stuff like that. But it's a really weird thing to try and handicap when you factor this into to figuring out what's going to happen.
I will say this: I'm betting against us winning only because, well, besides bad luck, but I mean, look, they played us really well when they came to Al Lang this year, and I don't see them. We said a while ago that pretty much we thought the 10 teams that were above the line a couple weeks ago, which are the 10 teams that are there right now, that we had agreed that those were going to be the 10 teams to make the playoffs. I think that's still true. I think the current top 10 is still going to be at least in some organization, the top 10 at the end of the year. But Charleston's always been the team that I've always thought of was the team that was kind of on the brink to go below the line if it happens. I think this is more of a watermark moment for them as far as the game itself. I think if we come out and win the game, I think Charleston might start feeling that a little bit because they haven't had a great run of results overall. And so I think if there's a moment for them to either believe that they're going to be in the playoffs or not, I think this game is their watershed moment. And I think that makes me nervous as a Rowdies fan.
Right.
Well, so I don't know.
And everything aside, you still have to factor in the fact that they've got Mike Anheuser there as the head coach. He was a player. He's been with the club since 1994.
Yeah.
He was a player from 94 through 98, became an assistant coach in 99, took over head coach sometime in the early 2000s. Like they've had that kind of consistency there, and even in a league, in a team where your playing roster changes sometimes a lot from one season to the next. They've got the guy there who's, we talk about how, this bus accident's kind of a weird thing for us to consider. He's probably seen something like that in his,
Yeah.
15 years,
Yeah.
25 years. God, 94 is when I graduated high school. 25 years with the club. Like, he's seen some weird stuff. Like, if anyone's going to be able to get this team ready, I don't want to do the cliche, like throw the record out the window, but he's a guy who knows how to organize and know how to coach his team. Like, he's been there for 25 years.
Yeah, and I think that you'll probably see this team come out and play really defensive. I don't see them coming out because they're not as athletic as like a New York Red Bulls. I mean, they're or like a North Carolina organizationally. I think they're going to come out playing really a defensive game, and I think it's going to be the same kind of struggle that we've had against better teams in this league, trying to break down those teams that are hunkered in. And I I don't know, man. I I'll say this too. Some of this depends on what our lineup looks like. Because like I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
if we start M Kasana, I think that's a mistake. I think if Barry's healthy and up to speed, I think that's a mistake. Tenari better be in this game, especially considering he was playing
Judging from
kickball.
his kickball performance, it looks like he's ready to go.
I would think he's ready to go. So I would think that Tenari should be back. Tejada should be back as far as starting 11. Hypothetically, Sean Barry should probably be in this game. I don't see benching Morad for one bad game. I'm not going that far yet. Plus, we don't really have a lot of defensive depth anyways.
Right.
And of course, I'm assuming McCarthy's back up to full speed because I know they held him out just in case, even though from what we understand, he did travel to New York, I guess, from what I understand. But
Yeah, I haven't heard any more info about the knock that he picked. Was it
yeah.
something he picked up like in warm-ups, or did he sit the wrong way on the flight? What happened? I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, those are some changes that I would expect. I think that if we make like all of those changes, I think we're in good shape. I know that's a lot. That's 4 different changes in the lineup, but I think I honestly think that we could probably use all 4 of them and just go after this thing and try and really get a win at Charleston. Don't lose 2 in a row.
Right.
Don't even allow that to happen. And I think that we could do it. But I think that one might be what I would go with because I was pretty surprised not to see Barry even on the bench last week. That
Mhm.
shocked me. So especially after what we've seen of
Especially
him
the way
last.
he's played coming in as a sub.
Yeah. Like I don't know what the deal is there. That's kind of weird to me. But you're talking a really big physical guy that has a lot of ball control and a lot of speed. I mean Malik is good, but he's a lot smaller of a guy.
Right.
And when you need goals in the air on set pieces and things like that, granted Tejada scored a lot of goals, but that's because he's just this like random fox. I, you're gonna want the bigger guys out there. And I think if you're gonna play against a team that's gonna probably bunker and play a very heavily defensive game like Charleston is, considering that's how they played us the first game when they came to Al Lang and they got that 88th minute goal to get a draw out of it. I don't really see a reason why this game won't be any different.
So are you predicting another 1-1 draw?
I'm not. I am actually going to go ahead and go out here and say that we win this game 2-1.
Now, see, I was all set that you were going to pick a draw and I was going to go with the win just to be different, so that one of us would have to be right, one of us have to be wrong. And now you've gone and picked the win.
I know I'm
Would
a
you
jerk.
say 2-1?
I'm saying 2-1.
If we're going to get a win, yeah, I'm going with 2-1 win also for the Rowdies.
There you go. Your rowdy seances, your
It's 2-0 at halftime. Say a 75th minute goal for Charleston in the second half, and we squeak it out from there.
I'm going to predict with 4 changes to the lineup that things are going to be a little weird at start. I think Charleston scores first. I think we will settle into the game, and we will get a couple of goals. At least one of them will be from the result of a set piece type play.
Also, Diakite will get his 5th yellow and
Yes.
will not play against Birmingham.
Yes.
If nothing else, I am 100% confident in making that prediction.
I will endorse that. Well, no, wait. Didn't he got a yellow card this last week? Isn't he sitting out this game?
He didn't get one last week, I don't think.
Oh man, you're
Not
gonna
that
make
I saw. Let me
crap.
double check, but I don't think he did. When I put the notes together, I was checking the cards. Yeah. Can you imagine a game in which 7 yellow cards were handed out and one of them wasn't to Diakite? That's a shocking performance from the referee right there.
Yeah, right. What are you thinking? All right, hold on. No, he had a yellow last week against New York.
Did he?
Yes.
So then he's
out for this game, I thought.
So he's out for this game then.
Yeah. Oh man, we might have 5 lineup changes this week if we're going to be that bold. I think as a coach, I think you should be that bold. I think this is a game to do that with. But
yeah, Diakite didn't even get out of the first half before he got that yellow.
So how do you reorganize the defense if Diakite's out? Do you put I don't trust Kone in there at all. I would say this. I would put Richards as center back. I would put Murad at left back and Kone at right defense. Or if you don't put Kone in right defense, put Doherty back there for right defender. That's how I think that's how I would do it.
That's going to be interesting. I could almost see them see Murad sliding over and maybe Barry coming in and even playing one of those fullback spots.
I could see that too, but it's just a question
just
of whether
to put the two kind of bigger bodies, especially against some of the forwards that Charleston has.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the fact that I think Richards is arguably the best individual defender of the 3.
Yeah.
On the team in general, and I almost wonder if I trust him more as a center back than I do Morad, only because Morad's coming off of that shaky start, so I think I would rather have him out on the outside. And Richards might be faster than Morad anyways, so he might be.
I think he's I would say he's probably faster. You might obviously Neil put Murad in center and just saying, look, you had a bad game, but we still have faith and confidence in you to run this.
Yeah, this is going to be.
I could see him doing that as kind of a morale move too.
Yeah,
this is going to be interesting to watch. See what happens.
I cannot wait until that. That's going to be awesome.
All right, so let's wrap this up. We're still going to win 2-1. I don't care. We can make 11 changes. We're winning 2-1. My we love you this week. I'm going to hop in here first. We've mentioned we were just talking about a little bit. I'm going to throw it out there to Tarek Murad. Did not have his best game last Friday. He'll be, he probably not the first, but he was right up there with being one of the first to say it, admitted himself, went on Twitter, said, this one's on me. I screwed up. Respect the guy that comes out and owns it like that and apologizes. And to make it clear, like, you win and lose as a team. There were opportunities to balance out that mistake that we didn't cash in on. But respect for him for going out there and saying this one's on me. So I'm going to throw my we love you out to him this week.
I absolutely embraced that when I saw that he went on Twitter very soon after that game was over and took ownership of that. That was a really professional and classy move by him. I was really, really, really happy with that. My we love you, I'm going to kind of repeat one from earlier this year. I am going to pick once again Pascal Million and the rest of the...
shout out to Pascal.
Because this past weekend, they won the national championship for the UPSL. So major congratulations to them. Pretty sure that marks off an undefeated season of something like what, like 17 games or something crazy when you
17,
factor
18, yeah. And they were down, I want to say they were down 2-0 going into like the last 10 minutes.
And I think like one game went into PKs, the other went into overtime or something crazy like that. Like
Well,
those games.
the semifinals and the final both went to penalties. No, I think they scored in extra time in the
Yeah,
semifinals,
extra. Yeah,
like in the 120th.
yeah,
And
that
then
time, yeah.
the final went to PKs.
Or something like that. Something like that.
Yeah,
But
I know the final was on PKs.
either way, those were two ridiculously close games, and for a team that went undefeated, that's hard to do at any level. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. That's hard to go undefeated at really any level of soccer.
Right.
To do it,
I mean, we're undefeated at podcasting. I think we're 216-0 right now. But it's a difficult thing to do.
this is true. This is really true.
No one's come onto our show and beaten us.
No, we only beat ourselves.
We don't like to talk about that kind of stuff on the radio, though. All right.
Used for scarves in the dark.
But going back to my we love you for a second. One of the things I really hate is anytime you can always tell the team that has lost, even if you haven't paid attention to results around the league, because they all hop on Twitter and say, well, it's not the result we were hoping for tonight, but thanks for the support from the fan. Like I'm tired of hearing not the result that we want. Oh, whatever.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
if you made an individual mistake, cool, own up to it. That's fine. Let it go. Like, I don't need the pep talk from like 2/3 of the roster, but both Murad and then Guinzotti said, hey, we're going to shake it off. Not worried about it. This happens. We'll be back. We'll be ready for the next one. Like, cool. One guy owned up for a couple of mistakes, and the guy said, hey, bad day at the office. Screw it. We'll be back and ready for the next one. That's it. That's all I need to hear.
Yeah, and it's probably easier because we're a smaller fan base. Like you go to certain fan bases and really like any comments, and it's just met with a storm of negative, nasty reactions. So I mean, it depends on the fan base too. But
Yeah.
I could see like where of course if you're on Twitter you would know this Paul Bamar, he's an MLS writer for The Athletic. Has been doing MLS stuff up there in DC area for a long time now.
Mhm.
And he has a personal individual crusade that he is trying to highlight against
the calm before the storm.
all sports teams use the same phrase over and over again, the calm before the storm, before their games. They'll take like a picture of the corner flag with the stadium in the background and like this nice sky above, and that's the caption to the photo for every pregame. I could see this being the next one that we're trying to eliminate. The we'll shake how do we want to phrase that? The we'll shake it off, or no, not the result we wanted.
Not
This
the
isn't
not the
not
result we were
result
hoping
wanted.
for.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's make sure that'll be our little mini crusade is eliminating that phrase from a post-game defeat from social media.
I sent Pablo something. I forget exactly what it was, but the way I worded the tweet was the storm before the calm. And I forget what it was, but I remember it made total sense to me, and he got a good kick out of it, and I think retweeted it, and I got some. I gotta look and see what that one was. The other one, and we'll see. I'll drop his name in here, see if he listens. I don't know if he does. Derek Sharp, who covers the Rowdies for Tampa Bay Times. He's a big college basketball guy too, and there's always when March Madness rolls around and teams start getting into the tournament by winning their conference or their conference tournament, they always do the punching their ticket.
Yeah,
It just drives him crazy. So if we can get rid of, like, we'll have to make sure when the Rowdies qualify for the playoffs and it's all legit, that we throw in a punch in their ticket. And then get a little calm before, like, we gotta just like get one night where we get like all of them in there at once.
yeah.
Like, hit every cliche. That would be fantastic.
We should have done that for retro night. That'd have been good.
Definitely. All right. Thank you again to Wolfface for the theme music, to Radio St. Pete for a place to do this stuff. to Shamrock Pub for giving us a spot as well at the bar every now and then and some beers to go with it. Thank you to you guys who, either whether you're listening right now or listening later on a podcast, thank you for continuing to find time in your schedule for us. Please continue to share, subscribe, rate, and review. If you'd like to support the show on an ongoing basis. By the way, I'm not taking podcast money and buying a hotel room for 2 days at Universal. Don't ignore those rumors. Just pretend that you never heard that. Definitely not what's happening. No, it really isn't. You can go to patreon.com/unusedsubspod, and maybe one day Steven can get a nice hotel room in Orlando also. Thank you also to our sponsor, Roughneck Scarves, the official scarf supplier of MLS, USL, and US Soccer. Get custom scarves for your group or team at roughneckscarves.com. That's it for us. We will see you next week. Talk to you next week. See you soon at Al Lang for the Birmingham game. Steven, have a safe trip, and I'll talk to you when you get back.
Sounds good. And I can't wait to go up there and be on the bus and see all of you rascals that are coming up there with us.
You know, right now it's kind of the calm before the storm. Punch your ticket for the bus.
I'm just not even going to acknowledge this at the moment.
I'm going to put it in there as the episode title just to see if that catches his eye. That's what I'm going to do.
There you go.
All right, Steven, I will talk to you later.
All right.
All right. See ya.
Yep. Go Rowdies.
The Rowdies were here, the Rowdies were there, they kicked the wall around.